In this video, we take a look back at some of the other pandemics that humans have endured. Specifically, we investigate cholera, the Black Death, and the Spanish flu, among others. We shall note any similarities and take lessons. Watch the video, mark the key points, and don't forget to share and like to spread the word. Pandemics have played a role in shaping human history throughout the ages. Few people remember outbreaks on this scale, but history shows us that although it is devastating, what we are experiencing now is nothing unusual. Now, we shall touch on the other pandemic that is still underway. HIV. With vast improvements in treatment, information, diagnostic capabilities, and surveillance in Western countries, it is easy to forget that experts still class HIV as a pandemic. Since the early 1980s, HIV has claimed the lives of more than 32 million people. At the end of 2019, around 38 million people were living with HIV. Although HIV is also caused by a virus, there are significant differences between the two current pandemics, the most obvious being their means of transmission. Unlike COVID-19, HIV cannot transmit via coughs and sneezes. Comparatively, COVID-19 spreads through communities much more easily. Within a matter of weeks, it has made it to every continent on Earth except Antarctica. Another important difference is that there are currently no drugs that can treat or prevent COVID-19. Although there is no vaccine for HIV, thanks to anti-retroviral medications, people who have access to care can now live long and healthy lives. Swine flu. Between April 2009 and April 2010, the swine flu pandemic affected an estimated 60 million people. There were also around 270,000 hospitalizations and deaths. Both swine flu and the novel coronavirus cause similar symptoms such as fever, chills, a cough, and headaches. Interestingly, some older adults had immunity, suggesting that swine flu or something similar might have infected large numbers of people a few decades before. Because of this immunity, 80% of the fatalities occurred in people younger than 65. This is the opposite with COVID-19. The overall mortality rate of swine flu was lower than that of COVID-19. Also, swine flu was less contagious than COVID-19. The basic reproduction number of swine flu is 1.5. This means that each individual with swine flu is likely to transmit the virus to an average of 1.5 people. The reproduction number of COVID-19 is 2.5 or higher. Severe acute respiratory syndrome. In 2002, severe acute respiratory syndrome SARS became the first pandemic of the 21st century. Like COVID-19, SARS was due to a coronavirus known as SARS-CoV. It also originated in China. Scientists believe that SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, originated in bats, moved into pangolins, then entered humans. Similarly, SARS-CoV began in bats, but it moved into civets before humans. Both SARS-CoV and the virus that causes COVID-19 can transmit via droplets from coughs and sneezes. Globally, SARS infected an estimated 8,000 people in 29 countries and had a mortality rate of 10%. This is higher than COVID-19's mortality rate. Both SARS and COVID-19 affect older adults more severely than they do younger individuals. Half of those over 65 who contracted SARS died, compared with 1% of people under 24. COVID-19 seems to be more infectious than SARS and has already spread to far more countries and killed more people than SARS. How did we eradicate SARS? Ensured surveillance, the isolation of those who contracted it, and strict quarantine measures halted the process of SARS. By interrupting all human-to-human transmission, SARS was effectively eradicated. Cholera. Over the past 2 centuries, cholera has reached pandemic proportions 7 times. The cholera pandemic of 1961-1975 was the seventh one. Cholera is a bacterial infection of the small intestine. It can be fatal within hours. The most common symptom is diarrhea, though muscle cramps and vomiting can also occur. Although immediate rehydration treatment is successful in up to 80% of cases, the mortality rate of cholera can be up to 50% without treatment. This is many times higher than even the highest estimates for COVID-19. Cholera occurs when a person ingests contaminated food or water. The seventh pandemic was caused by a strain called L-Tor, which scientists first identified in 1905. The outbreak appears to have begun on the island of Sulawesi in Indonesia. From there, it spread to Bangladesh, India, and the Soviet Union, including Ukraine and Azerbaijan. By 1973, the outbreak had also reached Japan, Italy, and the South Pacific. In the 1990s, though the pandemic had officially ended, the same strain reached Latin America, a region that hadn't experienced cholera for 100 years. An effective and relatively cheap method to prevent the transmission of cholera is the use of a folded sari, a long-cloth garment, to filter drinking water. In Bangladesh, this practice was found to decrease rates of cholera by nearly half. It involves folding a sari 4 to 8 times. Between uses, the clothes should be rinsed in clean water and dried in the sun to kill any bacteria on it. Nylon clothes appear to work as well, but is not as affordable. For certain genetic strains of cholera, such as the one present during 2010 epidemic in Haiti, death can occur within 2 hours of becoming ill. At the same time, not everyone infected with the bacteria of cholera could have any visible signs of the disease. This is a common feature with COVID-19. As with COVID-19, hand washing is essential for stopping the spread of cholera. To prevent cholera, access to safe water and good food hygiene are just as important. The food should be washed, consumed hot, and protected from flies. The Spanish flu. In the spring of 1918, health professionals detected a virus in United States military personnel. From January 1918 to December 1920, this virus, which appears to have moved from birds to humans, infected an estimated 500 million people. This equates to 1 in 3 people on Earth. The virus killed 700,000 people in the US and approximately 50 million worldwide. This strain of influenza, like COVID-19, transmitted via respiratory droplets. However, in stark contrast to COVID-19, a 25-year-old was more likely to die from the Spanish flu than a 74-year-old was. As with swine flu, it may be that older adults at this time had a pre-existing immunity to a similar pathogen. Perhaps the 1890 flu pandemic or the Russian flu afforded some protection to those who survived it. Additionally, some scientists believe that younger people's vigorous immune responses may produce excess fluid in the lungs, making breathing more difficult. At the time, there were no vaccines to prevent the disease and no antibiotics to treat the bacterial infections that sometimes developed alongside it. The virulent nature of this particular H1N1 strain and the lack of medication available made this the most severe pandemic in recent history. The pandemic came in 2 waves, the second being more deadly than the first. However, rather abruptly, the virus disappeared. The Spanish flu had a mortality rate of 2.5%, which is believed to be higher than COVID-19 has. In 1918, people tended to live in close quarters and did not value hygiene as much. Also, the world was at war, meaning that large numbers of troops were traveling to distant locations and aiding the spread. During World War I, malnutrition was common for both those at home and those on the front line. These factors can influence how quickly a virus spreads and how lethal it can be. Although the Spanish flu pandemic has many differences to today's COVID-19 pandemic, it teaches us a valuable lesson about the effectiveness of quickly implementing physical and social distancing measures. The plague. No video on pandemics would be complete without mentioning the Black Death, also referred to as the plague. Peaking in Europe between 1347 and 1351, the Black Death was responsible for an estimated 75 to 200 million deaths. In fact, it has killed half of the entire population of Europe. It is believed that the Black Death also originated in Asia. This pandemic was caused by a bacterium called Yersinia pestis rather than a virus. However, the Black Death march across the planet was enabled by rodents rather than humans. Rodents carrying bacteria-infected fleas spread this disease. Yersinia pestis partially blocks the guts of fleas. As the fleas feed on a human, they attempt to clear their blocked guts by regurgitating their meal. This effort releases Yersinia pestis into the vicinity of the flea's bite wound. Though much rarer, plague still exists, particularly in low-income regions like COVID-19. Plague transmits via respiratory droplets. The majority of cases now occur in Africa. Thanks to improvements in medicine and hygiene, the disease has not reached pandemic proportions since the Black Death. Without treatment, the case fatality ratio can be 30 to 100%. In the US, the mortality rate of plague before antibiotics was 66%. By 2010, modern medicine had reduced this figure to a still high 11%. The Black Death pandemic eventually waned, and this seems to have been for a few reasons. People began to self-quarantine, and they stopped traveling as freely through fear of catching the disease. People also started to hold fragrant handkerchiefs against their mouths when in public, and this might have reduced the risk of infection and transmission. Lessons to be learned. Although there are significant differences between the reviewed pandemics and COVID-19, there are some key takeaways here. The first, surveillance is important. We need to know who is affected and who has been affected. Indeed, testing is key to our understanding of COVID-19 and how to slow its progress. The second, we have also learned that physical distancing and quarantine measures work. The third, where a pandemic happens, both geographically and historically, also makes a difference. Would the Black Death have been so devastating had the people of the time had access to modern medical treatments, an understanding of how germs spread, and improved nutrition? Probably not. The fourth, it may be of little consolation, but it might help some of us psychologically to remember that we are not the only humans to have experienced such trials and tribulations, and we shall not be the last. The fifth, it is also important to remember that pandemics do end, and that modern science and medicine can be incredible forces for good. We no longer live in the dark ages. We are better armed today than we have ever been. Please share this video, because it may save someone's health and potentially a life. Also feel free to comment and to subscribe to get a new video the moment it comes out.